They saw an 841% relative conversion lift.
You got to pick the leading indicator and build your testing and your modeling and your measurement off of that leading indicator.
Measure what matters in that context of where you're spending dollars.
Insights into the innovations and revolutions of the marketing world. Welcome to the Marketing Scientists Podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Marketing Scientists. Today, I'm joined by Jae from LinkedIn. Jae runs the product team and the product around conversion lift on LinkedIn. This is a new measurement capability, a new incrementality testing capability at LinkedIn, and we're going to talk all about it. So let's dive straight in. Jae, I am so excited to have you on this podcast. We exchanged some LinkedIn DMs a few months ago when I was excited about Conversion Lift, and I had heard that it's in beta or some customers had access to it. So I'm very excited about having you on the podcast to talk all about that. And thanks for joining me today.
I'm happy to be here. And more excitingly, conversion lift testing is actually now fully available. So really, if anything, the timing is delayed for you and I chatting, but I'm glad that it's out there for us to talk about more openly.
No, that's fantastic. And yeah, I tell all of my customers, prospects, and everybody in the ecosystem, every ad platform should have conversion lift baked in as a default sort of capability. And I'm very excited that you all are making some big strides in that direction. So, why don't we start there, Jae? And I want to start with a very simple question. What actually compelled you all to launch this product, and why this was sort of at the top of your priority list? And I'm not sure if it was top of your priority list, but I think this is your baby. This is your product. So tell us about sort of how it took shape, how it sort of got birthed within, a large organization like LinkedIn. And let's dig into that after you give us a little bit of an intro.
Sure. So I've been with LinkedIn. My name is Jae Oh. I lead our measurement and marketplace signals teams for LinkedIn. I've been at LinkedIn for roughly 7.5 to 8 years now at this point. Probably check my LinkedIn profile for that. And, the mission that we've been on as long as I've been here is like, as LinkedIn helps to drive growth and create economic opportunity for the global workforce, what role does marketing play in that? And specifically, what can marketing with LinkedIn play in that? And if we're going to be true to our values at our core, we should be proving and driving incremental growth with the business through marketing by helping connect potential buyers with their sales counterparts or by purchasing directly. And so when we talk about lift testing or the context of conversion lift testing or any of the measurement products, the mission's really clear. Like, how do we not only help you do your job as digital marketers today, but also start proving that these things are working when it comes to driving your bottom line? If LinkedIn is a place where business happens, let's make it easy for you to measure that and show that whatever you use, reporting, MMM, a variety of solutions in the measurement suite, they help to reinforce those decisions you need to make in a very data-driven way. And so maybe it's not the most important thing, but certainly it is an important thing in terms of like how we think about arming you as a business to make the best decision possible.
All right, that's a good sort of framework for this conversation. When I started sort of really paying attention to LinkedIn as a marketing channel, this was probably a few years ago, and the reason for it was quite simple. It was I was starting my own business, and so that's Paramark, right? And I had to find a way to sort of get our word out there, and LinkedIn was a very natural sort of place to start building that sort of foundation, given that a lot of B2B and B2C marketers were on LinkedIn in the first place. And so we started with organic, and I'm happy to say we just started advertising on LinkedIn, I think 3 weeks ago. So we're now an advertising customer as well, which is great. So you'll get more feedback from me as we go on. The thing that is, obviously interesting and hard, and I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday on LinkedIn. This whole discussion is so meta, but it's great. And the question that they asked me was like, hey, does everything have to be incremental? Does everything have to be viewed from the lens of incrementality? And I'm curious what your take is when you hear that question, especially as we're talking about, conversion lift, which is basically an incrementality solution. Talk to me about how you would answer that question if you're advising an advertiser on LinkedIn.
I think net at the end of the day, when it comes to does marketing make an impact on my sales or outcome, everything is incremental. But in pursuit of how you think about, well, for every additional dollar I spend here, does it drive $2, in terms of like the growth of my business? In pursuit of that in real time, like there are a lot of other things that you could use to maybe better triangulate or like capture real-time progress. And so the analogy I give to my newer like product folks that join my team, or a lot of folks that I talk about, where it's like, well, we talk about the holy trinity of measurement. MMM, it's retrospective. Takes a lot of data. You look backwards. Testing, you have to set aside time for that. It's fixed. And of course, there's constraints. Randomized trials are the right way to go. And the attribution could be both retrospective, but also real time as you think about like conversion rates and whatnot. And the analogy I use when we talk about these things is often how you think about becoming a faster runner for a marathon, right? And so, when you're doing these training sessions, the things that you need to know, a direction that things are going well, is like, I feel better during that run. My pace seems to be steadier. My VO2 max is good, right? And that's analogous to like campaign reporting, performance reporting. This is great directional data, right? Assuming you're targeting the right folks. But then I need something more. And so I start making these little tweaks towards, my sleep, my diet, things like that. Attribution serves a role in that. Now, are the things I'm doing resulting in the ideal behavior that I want? Is there a relationship there that I can start teasing out, right? And so I start building some confidence around these things. And then I go a little bit further, right? And so like, how do they come together? And so MMM is similar to like you getting a Apple Health Tracker or app. It starts to give you some guidance that these things are more effective. These are the trends that I'm seeing that's influencing, the kind of outcomes you want to see. But ultimately, you'll get down to the point where you'll either realize 1 year later, effectively, it's a real-time test. You didn't intend it to be, you didn't run as fast as you wanted, or you're a little bit smart about it. It's like, I'm going to run a 10K. I'm going to run a half marathon. And that really helps bring it back together. It validates that I got faster from the last race to this race. And so incrementality is something that gives you a little bit more clarity. It helps correct or maybe reinforce those assumptions that you already had. It is not the single tool. Absolutely not. But it should be a part of your wheelhouse, if at all, if it's something that you can make work when it comes to, of course, your budget or wherever you are in your marketer journey.
I love that answer. I'm preparing for a 5K that's happening in SF in, I think it's September 3rd or 5th, I forget. So we signed up as a team to go for that run, and I've been tracking my progression. I haven't run in ages, and so it's mostly just getting comfortable with it, but I love that analogy. Okay, so let's dig in a little bit. Tell us about how conversion lift on LinkedIn actually works. Just walk us through a mechanics of, if there is an advertiser who's spending maybe 50,000, 100,000, maybe a few, 100,000 a month on LinkedIn, what can they do to start benefiting from conversion lift on LinkedIn?
So conversion lift testing today works at the account level. And really, because it's there to help a advertiser figure out, are my brand campaigns having a net influence on the downstream conversions that matter to me? A white paper download, this is a visit to my site, this is someone actually signing up and purchasing something. It's actually really simple to launch. So whether you're a full funnel marketer or you're doing brand and you're trying to figure out what the downstream effect is, you go create a test. Most of it's already set up. If you have conversions data coming through Cappy, it's even better. It's going to go to look at any and all lift across all conversion events that are there, and they'll help tease out the ones that seems most prominent. Now, there's, of course, budget minimums that are necessary at the whole account level to make sure that as we split the audience and account for bias around activity and whatnot, that is truly randomized and to give you stat-sig results. But, we imagine right now it's actually the setup is super easy. The more data you feed it, the more insights we can provide you. And over time, we'll start worrying about how do we advance this to provide more granularity at a campaign level, maybe make it more proficient with lower budgets. This is just a natural roadmap of things we need to do in order to maybe advance the product for more availability, more coverage for all advertisers.
Okay, fantastic. When you all thought about launching this, and obviously, I've been part of product teams. There's always a roadmap to think about and get something, meaningful and simple out there, get feedback and iterate. So I'm curious if there's anything that you've learned over the alpha, beta, GA process that was a big aha moment for you all, or any sort of compelling stories that come to mind as like gave you conviction, like we're headed in the right direction. This is going to be amazing for marketers. I'm curious if anything comes to mind like that.
Yeah, I think the journey for this came much earlier than before we started actually doing any code development for conversion lift testing. And so I think you and I chatted before about things like their revenue attribution report, or us trying to bring in those like B2B metrics to help you understand, are these the campaigns influencing this amount of deal size, or et cetera. And so the signal was starting to become very clear, right? Brand marketers or full funnel marketers were still seeing a net improvement when it comes to pipeline. And when we looked at it with third-party studies, where it's like in situations where LinkedIn had a role versus LinkedIn didn't have a role, meaning specifically we impressed them in some way versus not, we saw dramatic differences in terms of sales velocity, average deal size, even close win rate. And so when we started getting that kind of direction indication, as I mentioned, like one measurement thing points in a certain direction, it's good to validate. And so we launched an alpha, we built a beta, and there's of course little tweaks in terms of like what data should we use, what's the right time frame, what should we initially launch with. Like those were small learnings, but the bigger learnings started coming out when we realized one tech company, more than 5,000 incremental conversions. And, volume is one thing, but they saw an 841% relative conversion lift. It's like massive. I mean, they looked at us and they said, we have two teams that are working with you. We have our brand marketers that are saying that LinkedIn's way too expensive. We have our demand marketers saying, it's actually pretty good. We should correct for that. We thought maybe 2 or 3 times in the value that we expected. And they walk away with 800+% conversion lift. That's relative conversion lift. And that's monstrous. Like this is the important context and the right audience for you. And so having that add another customer come out, and they said that 540% relative conversion lift as well. And that's like 3,000 incremental conversion. That would have never happened without seeing a LinkedIn ad. And so those things then like translating to marketers giving us active feedback, how it influences their lead scoring and their boost conversion rates, like started influencing other parts of their marketing plans outside of just core paid media. I mean, that gave us a lot of confidence that, okay, let's not wait further. Let's go in and bring it to market as quickly as possible, be a functional tool for action and behavior, and then figure out how do we actually make this more available to the masses as we like tune and offer some parity functionality with other platforms that offer the service.
That's great. Those are some amazing numbers. 800% or 300% or like anything that's above 100% is just crazy. So that's awesome. Yeah. One of the criticisms that I hear of, incrementality testing or conversion lift, which are two names for, very similar concepts in many ways, is that, hey, it doesn't really work for B2B. And blanket statements are thrown out sometimes, right? And I think you and I understand it as insiders to some degree that it's not really about B2B or B2C. It's more about, as you said, the volume of data that we're working with. So I'm curious if there's other, thoughts that you all had when you were developing the product on who is this built for? Who is this meant for? When can you not use it? I'm curious if you have any reaction to this point about, hey, conversion lift doesn't really work for B2B audiences.
I think that's a very, like to your point, it's a very blanket dismissal that is, doesn't get at like, well, how would you solve it, right? And when someone creates an objection like that, they should have some construct for, well, these are the reasons why. And so if I look at it superficially, it's because B2B takes a long time for a sale to close. And so like, do you run a test forever where you get the signal? Number 2, not everyone is a B2B buyer. Everyone can buy toothpaste and toilet paper. Not everyone can sign up on a deal. And so when you apply those kinds of concerns or constraints to other platforms where we have high dilution of, well, how many of those people are actually professionals or within a professional context? Not everyone's professional, right? At least the professional audience you care about. These are targeted companies that you want to land. It doesn't work. It washes out. And they say, so it's not really valid. Now you place that same opportunity within an environment where these are very much densely professionals that you specifically can target with high accuracy. Those companies you care about, industry you care about. Now it just becomes only a data question, right? Is there enough data? Is enough throughput within that time period, right? And can the test run long enough to get a signal while not being so long it takes forever for you and is, eating up 30% of your potential target audience, right? And so when we built the solution, we had the same concerns, to be very honest with you, but realized, it works. It works here. It's not going to be conclusive every single time. But, we had vast majority of people that were in alpha and beta. It absolutely worked. And so to answer that next question that you aren't answering now is like, what does a B2B version of conversion lift testing look like? When we talk about a conversion lift in B2C, every conversion potentially is a sale, theoretically, right? But That's not exactly the same thing when it comes to B2B. And so where does the feature start mapping itself to be? Sale. I need to show something around revenue lift, pipeline lift, sale lift. This is a next logical step. Is that possible on another platform? I'll say maybe to be generous, but most likely not. Is it possible on LinkedIn? When we randomize, don't we know which companies people work for? Don't we know what seniorities they map to? And so without like fully telling you exactly what we're going to do, I'm kind of telling you this is the feature we're going to, because that's what B2B needs. We need to provide a means to understand conversion lift as a means to better, not just proxy, but understand revenue and pipeline. And so it's really exciting because we have a unique position to do that. And I think it's our responsibility to that. And it's kind of scary because we don't know what that will look like, but it's something that the team is deeply invested in. And you kind of see that across our measurement suite of products panning out.
That's a great tidbit that you've left us with. So I'm excited to catch up with you when you launch that future product. And I think you answered the question really well is, hey, ultimately you want to get to that revenue lift. And this is a conundrum that many B2B marketers find themselves in, is that, hey, if my sales cycle is 9 months, am I going to wait for an experiment to last 9 months before I can call it conclusive or inconclusive, or was there lift or was there no lift? And what we advise customers is, hey, you got to pick the leading indicator and build your testing and your modeling and your measurement off of that leading indicator. Hopefully you've done the hard work to really know that that is a true leading indicator and it's not a vanity metric. And so it seems like you're kind of saying similar things, but with an added layer that your ambitions are to go all the way to potentially revenue. But I'm curious if that longer sales cycle will make that quite challenging, or are you thinking about other ways of addressing that, or did I misunderstand sort of how you're thinking?
No, you're right. But empirically, is there any company that's going to fully stop all sales and marketing motions for a period of time? There isn't. And at the same time, not all sales cycles are kicking off right now. So at any point you introduce a solution like this, right in this moment, you yourself in your business, like there are people at different stages of the pipeline already. And so the question is, in aggregate, can you start detecting with early metrics, leading indicators, as well as midterm, and then ultimately the final ones we care about through a test? Is it possible to measure that? We know that's true. We know that's absolutely true. And it is a question of data. It is a question of engagement or response rate. It's a question of, are you targeting the right type pool population where you actually care about detecting that lift? So, while it might be challenging, I think it's absolutely doable just from a numbers perspective. And because we know this is possible, right? And so how we know it's how we know it's possible is, if you think about it as a consumer, you have intentions with, the products that you like, the clothing that you buy. And come one marketing cycle later, you just change your perspective because something's new and in trend. And it feels like a decision you made on your own, but you and I know as people that work in the industry, like we are heavily influenced by what we see. And so did that happen because I wasn't thinking about buying anything until right now when the ad showed up? No, I was already in the process of considering other products. And so a little bit of like common sense comes into saying like, well, marketing doesn't have to be a clean slate because the world doesn't operate that way. But the instrumentation for how we measure things like this should factor in, understand the relationship between leading metrics and ultimately what we want to measure, and can we create a mechanism to create more and more clarity around those two?
Love that answer. And in fact, even with our B2C customers, so we're a little bit unique that we work with both B2B customers and B2C customers. We often get a similar reaction where people are like, hey, we want to understand the impact on traffic. We want to understand the impact on add to cart. We want to understand the impact on new sales. And we want to understand impact on repeat sales, which is kind of the same thing of, hey, there's activity happening at different layers of the buyer journey, and you're trying to understand the impact across all. And B2B is very similar: traffic, leads, pipeline, closed won, and potentially in the future, cross-sell, upsell. So it makes a ton of sense. This is great. I'm curious, you're deep into incrementality and conversion lift, and that's all great. And we're very aligned on sort of how we see the world there. Is there a metric or a framework or a philosophy that you think is overlooked that B2B marketers should be paying more attention to, and any reason why you believe that?
I'm trying not to go into a framework because as a product person, I tend to over index on frameworks already in my day to day. So let me try to keep it a little bit simpler. The one thing that comes to mind most frequently, which is a strange exercise in cognitive dissonance, is when you talk to a marketer and maybe they identify as a brand marketer and it's like, oh, I care about scaled reach at efficient cost. It's like, how big of an audience do they capture? How many of them are now following my brand? And then you talk to someone at demand gen and they give you the opposite, what you'd expect. And it's around like conversions and leads and et cetera. And the thing that you wonder that it would naturally fit into, but it doesn't always, is ROAS. How does what you do map to ROAS? And to your point, like, do you know how your leading indicator drives ROAS? And that cognitive dissonance is because at their level or their role or their target, they're not evaluated that way, but you should always be thinking about it that way, right? Because the goal of marketing is to drive growth through your business. It's not a marketing versus sales. It's a marketing plus sales, or it's marketing ultimately directly going direct to consumer and sales. But does marketing make an impact on my business? At the end of the day, that's the only thing that everyone cares about. But in flight, when people identify with their function of the job, there's a tendency to remove themselves from that, and they might chase a metric that's the wrong metric, right? And so the frameworks might be different, but I always come back to, how does the metric that you're doing give you a strong or loose relationship, a correlation understanding to ROAS? And then the second question is like, do you need to improve your framework so you can correct it? Is it just reach or is it quality reach? Is it scaled reach for the audience you care about, right? If it's engagement, what kind of engagement, So can you take that leading metric and map it in a way with high confidence that it's starting to move the metric you care about, which is return on ad spend? And so when marketers face that pressure cooker from your CRO or CFO or maybe CEO, well, what did marketing do? And you respond, well, you got like incremental reach. It's probably not going to secure your next year's budget, right? And so like, give me a defensible argument from wherever you are that tells me this is the way I built my bridge to helping you understand that the growth that you're seeing is being influenced some amount, some way by what I'm doing.
Oh, that was a spicy take, Jay.
I'm probably going to get in trouble.
I don't think you can work in ad tech or marketing without having a spicy take or without getting in some amount of hot water, right? It's not a perfect science, even though we think we can, get to a perfect science, but it's hard. But this point about ROAS is really interesting because I was having an internal conversation with a colleague of mine, and we were, thinking about this ourselves. Should everything be measured on ROAS? And my answer was like, yes and no. And I'll tell you sort of how I thought about it. And I think it's very similar to your response. I said yes, because if I put my business hat on and my finance hat on, well, that's the only way that I have to measure the impact of this capital decision that I'm making, which is I'm allocating dollars to this function. The place where I think there's a little bit of a no is there are certain things that are never going to truly be able to show up in a dashboard or a report. And for those things, you do have to apply judgment. And an example that I give here is if I'm launching a completely new way of thinking about our business or our product, I come up with a completely new tagline and I launch it on LinkedIn as an organic social post. Like, am I going to really go and question the ROAS or how much time and effort that I, spend into coming up with that concept or with that post? Probably not. And sometimes even this might get me in trouble is if you launch a new Super Bowl ad, right? And you do something crazy and creative and put it out there. And if you think about measuring it the exact same way as the 99% of the rest of your marketing mix, you are going to struggle because it's such a point in time, once in a year type of thing that you did. So you have to tailor your efforts around measurement to some of those nuances or some of those exceptional sort of cases. But generally, for 80 to 90% of your budget, I completely agree with you that ROAS has to be the guiding light to how you make those capital allocation decisions.
100%. And I don't think we're saying anything different, but like oftentimes it comes down to, what do you really need to measure what matters in that context of where you're spending dollars, but also like there's a time lag. And so like the example that I think about often, and I'm not trying to turn this into an academic exercise, is we think about how Coca-Cola basically completely blasted past Pepsi and everyone else during the Depression era. And so like they invested while their business was going lower and heavily in brand. You can't dissociate Santa Claus and that red from Coca-Cola. And especially if you're, a millennial or Gen X or Gen Z, you definitely remember those revival ads, right? And so this spend is so permanent. And could you have detected a sales hike in about a month or a quarter? People aren't spending that kind of money for soda, right? And so you measure over the span of a year, you measure over the span of the next 2 or 3 years. And it's like, when I think about anything kind of like a Coke, that cola is Coca-Cola, right? And so I think being very thoughtful about, to your point, it's an investment portfolio. I mean, think about like investing in the stock market. Some of these things are long holds because you know that this is going to pan out, or you're making a leap to do so. But you start calibrating along the way where it's appropriate. Is this trailing the way that I expected to? And it's still important. It's just different, in terms of how you measure that.
Very well said. Like, that example is fantastic. And I think this is the hardest question in marketing science today, which is that long-term impact of those types of activities, right? We talk about this with customers all the time. Is you can talk about what I call immediate impact. You can talk about sort of a few months out, a few quarters out, maybe even a year out. When you start thinking about multi-year type of investments, right? Things that are going to continue to have that longer term impact. One of the things that's in my mind is really just market share. It's a lagging indicator, but looking at, are you continuing to get more penetration and share of the way that you describe your market? And if that's continuing to trade up, it probably has quite a lot to do with your overall efficiency of your marketing. Are there other things like that you think about as somebody who's obviously studied this space? Like, is that a good way of thinking about it? Is there a different way of thinking about it?
Yeah, I like the example you gave because share is really the game that we play here, right? And whether we're talking about if we're talking about Snap or TikTok or any other platform, a lot of things people talk about is like, how much mind share do you have? How much brain share do you have? And then when we translate to a metric, it might be share of voice. And so the way we've been thinking about it is, if you are in B2B, actually the world is a little bit simpler in some ways, where you probably know who your direct competitive pool is and who you need to compete against for a share of voice, engagement, sale. And so as we lean into some of the metrics that are maybe both good for B2C, but maybe also further tailored for B2B, we want to get into a place you not only know your competitors. If you're marketing on LinkedIn, you also know who your target accounts are that you'll reach effectively. And now suddenly the question of, can I give you an insight in how you're competing against your direct peers for your share of voice? Because it's a really, really meaningful metric you probably can't get somewhere else, right? And so long story short, it is important and is mindful for me and how we support things like that help you as a incumbent remain competitive. If I asked you to think about a CRM platform, I'm going to be really easy and good at guessing with what number 1 or 2 might be, right? And so but at the same time, if you're new, you will fight. You will have to fight to get that share of voice or share of mind. And so how do we help you also gauge how much you're progressing against that in our platform and maybe through our partners? And so very top of mind, everything is a competition within that space, but what's lacking, which we can do a better job about, is creating insight in how well you're competing and not just see that when it comes to the sale or pipeline or, things that are way trailing. And so, I have it's funny that you picked up on that, but that's something that I am deeply investing in and trying to bring that kind of intelligence further upstream with the team.
That's fantastic. Very excited to hear about that. Okay, this was great, Jay. I learned a lot about sort of how you all are thinking about it, and I leave feeling even more confident about LinkedIn as a platform. So that's fantastic. I have a slightly different question. So you studied biophysics and physiology and medicine and public health. How did you go from that to marketing and marketing science? I'm curious, what was your journey, and was that a conscious decision? And a lot of what you do is obviously sort of deeply rooted in the statistics that you must have learned as part of your science background. But tell us a little bit about that.
I learned something really early on for myself that, my mom, single mother for quite some time before she remarried. And, I felt a pressure to be a certain archetype. And a lot of immigrant kids might, feel this as well, like your lawyer, doctor, engineer, something like that, and kind of mapping my path back. And I found out pretty early on that's not me. the way that I find drive and resilience and motivation is being passionate about something that I care about, a problem space that I care about, or wanting to learn something. And so, what I found out is like I wanted to work on things that drive meaningful impact that I could see somehow. And the things along that journey is that I want to learn how to do something really well. And so when I went into genetics and healthcare, and then eventually like my first career, which was in public policy, the thing I had that was driving the one thing I wanted to do is drive policy change to help make lives better, hopefully. And then the things I want to learn is how do I storytell really effectively? How do I lead with conviction and gather the data to do so? Fast forward a while, I realized policies take forever to change, and most of the time people don't read it. And so I can't see the change. How do I move forward from that? And so I started going to like clinical research. Can I speed up how drugs come to market? Can I learn about statistics and design? And so it's always been a mix of like, how do I measure and see impact that I could directly influence? And like, what skill can I learn along the way that I'd be really excited about? That's really map my path rather than a set destination. And so like now 3 careers in, I think I'm exactly where I need to be now. And marketing is exciting because it's a multi-sided marketplace problem. There's so many dynamics at play. There's so much tech at play. And I still care about how do we help small businesses like grow? How do we help large businesses continue to tailor and personalize their experiences for the right buyers instead of just everyone? And so these things continue to be really good problem spaces, and tied to LinkedIn's mission, it fits me really well. It's really great guiding force for how I think about my journey. Like work shouldn't just be about making income, which was obviously a concern, but at the end of the day, like I need to feel a reason to do the things that I do. And I found my way here that way.
Amazing. Yeah, I find that folks who have that science background tend to sort of do really well in the marketing measurement and science space. So excited to have met you. Thanks again for all the time that you spent with us, and also for giving us a little bit of a preview of what to expect in the future. This was fantastic. Any other last pieces of advice for folks? Like, do you engage with other folks on LinkedIn? Do you want feedback from, other marketers? Should they reach out to you? Should they reach out to their reps? Like, tell us how they should engage with you.
So open channels, happy to engage. Give me all the feedback, specific feedback, please. Connect with your reps, of course, but hey, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, that's why it's there. The only bit of like advice I would give anyone is, especially these days, lots of influencers in the professional sense want to make their mark with sensationalist headlines. And so, MMA is useless because of this. Incrementality testing doesn't work for this. Attribution is dead. And literally this cycle happens every single year. It's not different from saying, don't eat carbs. Carbs are fine. And so like this constant pattern just gets shouted at us, and you get traction with a part of the market that this resonates with because they've been burned in some way related to that, or looking for a fast solution. I think being thoughtful about what you're trying to do and what's the strengths and weaknesses of the tools that you're using in order to accomplish a very specific goal that you're after is really the only piece of advice I can give. And to approach these things with a sense of curiosity and passion. And like, I think you can't really go wrong there and then pursue that. And I'm glad that podcasts like yours exist because it allows folks to have these kinds of conversations. So thank you for
That's great. That's great. I don't know if you meant to, but you kind of called me out because I take a dig at attribution all the time on LinkedIn. And, so I'm one of those sensationalist influencers. Sometimes I kind of have to play that role. And I totally appreciate what you're saying, right? Which is there's always some goodness in everything, but it's the blind faith that we put in certain things that makes it really hard to have a reasonable and nuanced conversation. And, the biggest problem I have with attribution is very simple. It's one of like, did you ever watch The West Wing? Have you watched that show?
Love The West Wing. Yeah.
Okay. So the second episode, I think, was titled Propter Hoc, Post Hoc Ergo Propter Hoc. And it's literally a fallacy where it says event B happened after event A, so event A must have caused event B. And that is the synthesis of my dig against attribution, nothing else, right? It's like, if you understand that fallacy and you can make sense of what you're looking at is colored with that sort of, issue, then okay, let's chat, right? Let's talk about now, can we do something meaningful with that data?
Yeah. That is the most elegant way I've heard someone say last click attribution is wrong, but it's totally true.
Jae, this was amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And we'll chat again in a few months when you have more stuff to share. And yeah, have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
All right, folks, that was Jae Oh, who recently launched a conversion lift feature at LinkedIn and runs all of their measurement offerings. So go connect with him on LinkedIn. As you heard, he loves the feedback, the good, the bad, the ugly. Go share your feedback with him and tune in again next week for another insightful and fun conversation.